بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله انتجبه لولايته واختصه برسالته وأكرمه بالنبوة وأشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأمينه في أرضه وهجته على عباده اللهم صل على محمد وآله الطاهرين المعصومين أوصيكم عباد الله إياي بتقوى الله. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin today's sermon, the sermon of Jum'ah, it's pertinent, it's important that I remind myself, I admonish myself in adhering to the principles and the disciplines of taqwa. And of course, to advise each and every one of you to adhere to the advices and the disciplines of taqwa. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Holy Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha, O you who believe, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, develop taqwa such that it promotes you to do good and it repels you from doing evil. وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, and be amongst those who are truthful, those who represent the truth. What's interesting is that when you refer to the story of the magicians that battled with Nabi Musa alayhi salam, it's a remarkable story that demonstrates how when they were exposed to the truth, they submitted themselves entirely to it. And they accepted it in such a way that they were willing to give their own lives, that they were willing to leave the camp of Fir'aun and to join the movement of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. You have these personalities who are known to be the supporters of the supporters of Fir'aun. They somehow saw power when they were affiliated with Fir'aun. Power has this ability to corrupt the mind of the human being, to corrupt the heart of the human being. The more wealth a person has, the more fame and influence a person has within society, naturally he wants more and he wants more. Greed, until it overpowers him. When you look towards the story of Fir'aun and the magicians, these magicians, they were willing to leave everything behind, to become slaves in the eyes of Fir'aun, only to join the truth and to accept the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises them in the sets of verses in the Holy Quran. Now, when you come across this idea of taqwa and developing taqwa, it's important to understand that taqwa is a formula of two things. Number one, to have iman, to believe in the unseen, to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to believe in the prophets and their message, to believe in the imams and their message, and of course to believe in the hereafter. Now all of these things for us are aspects of the unseen. And of course the Quran mentions this in many verses, that one of the formulas of being a successful human being is that you have belief in the unseen. Number one. Number two, the second entity of the formula is that you embrace amalun salih, that we continuously do good within our lives. That we stand and we pray, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship, but also do good to the people around us, to our families, to our friends and our neighbors, and to the people in our communities, and in the people of our societies. Even to do good towards peoples that we have no interaction with. By, for example, helping them financially, by helping them, by praying for them, engaging in dua, especially to those who are oppressed in different parts of the world. So these two aspects, to believe, and number one, and number two, to do amalun salih, is a formula of how a person can develop taqwa. And it pushes a person to gain proximity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the underlying concept that gives strength, that gives spiritual value to iman, number one, and number two, amalun salih, is what is known as ikhlasun niyyah, to have the sincerest and the purest of intentions. When a person understands the importance of gaining knowledge, he asks the question, what is the purpose of me gaining knowledge? What is my intention? Is it to, for example, debate with the different scholars that are out there? Is it to create my own madhab so that I create my own following? Is it to, for example, contribute to the madhab in a positive way or to contribute to the madhab in a negative way? All of these questions are pertinent for a person who decides to gain knowledge and to embrace the religion of Islam, number one. Number two, therefore you find the importance behind the idea of having the sincerest of intentions. Now there's a very interesting verse in the Holy Quran. مَثَلِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. When Allah begins to speak about the disbelievers, those who have rejected the religion of Islam, what does he say? He says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. And as for the disbelievers, the parable of those who have rejected the message of Islam, أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَالرَّمَادِ اشْتَدَّتْ بِهِ الرِّيحِ. Their actions are like the ashes which the wind blows. فِي يَوْمٍ آسِفٍ. On a day, on a stormy day. So imagine you have a stormy day, the wind blows with force. When you throw ashes in the air, imagine how scattered these ashes become. Now this ayah, what it does is, as explained by the ulama, is that it explains the position of a human being when he does good, when he believes, but not with the sincere intentions, not with the purest of intentions. The idea behind this is that Islam gives a lot of weight, gives a lot of value to the intention of the human being. A small action done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries great reward, and it is seen as magnificent in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than, for example, an action that is repeatedly performed day in, day out for many, many years, and where the human being carries not the strongest of intentions. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at the heart of the action, and He doesn't look at the action itself. What beautifies and magnifies the action is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that lies behind them. The Holy Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam has said, make your heart sincere, even for the most littlest of actions, for it will be sufficient for you. That an action which is as small as the atoms or the weight of the atoms will be seen on the Day of Judgment. And if it is done with the most sincerest of actions, it is much more powerful, much more weighty than the actions which were performed without the sincerest of intentions. The intention of the action is what solidifies the action. It's what gives weight to the action, is what brings about reward and what brings about punishment for that particular human being. Now, amongst the ulama, from amongst them the marja of our time, Sheikh Nasr Makarim Shirazi, in his tafsir, when he begins to develop, when he begins to expound on the ideas behind this particular verse, he says there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses ashes as a parable. He says, why ashes in particular? He says ash is a remains of destruction. When fire, for example, eats away wood, the ashes that remain, or the ashes that are created, it has no benefit in itself. It's useless. Yes, a person can use it to, for example, build things or make things. A person can decorate using ashes. But in itself, ash has no benefit in it whatsoever. Nothing grows from it. It doesn't give life. It doesn't give fruits. It doesn't give anything that is beneficial to the human being. A small pot of soil, for example, can have plants growing within it. But nothing can emerge from ashes, number one. Number two, he says the particles of ash, they're not bound together. They don't stick together. And they can blow away very, very easily. This is different from the believers when they perform an action with the sincerest of intentions. Even though the act itself may be little, even though the act itself may be very minute, as long as the intention is sincere, as long as the intention is pure, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are bound together with faith, and that is what gives it weight. Number three, he says once the particles of these ashes are blown away, nothing can bring them back again. Once they separate from one another, they are no longer recognized as ash. They lose their identity such that it cannot be discerned. And this brings about weakness. Likewise, a human being who, for example, believes and does amalun salih, but without the sincerest of intentions, it becomes like the like the ash. It loses its identity and it carries no weight or benefit in it for the human being whatsoever. Amongst the ulama, you find that they constantly remind the Muslimin and the mu'mineen that the niyyah, the intention, is the heart of the action. It is the soul, it is the energy of the action itself. It is what gives the physical action spiritual value. Not only in this world, but also in the hereafter. A very famous hadith, النية أفضل من الأعمال, or النية أفضل من الأمل, that the intention is far greater and more weightier than the amal itself. الأعمال بالنية, this is another saying, that the actions is primarily foundationed, it is primarily based on the intention of the human being. Such that, imagine, and this is something that has been discussed amongst the fuqaha, they say, imagine a person who, for example, has the intention of reciting Salat al-Layl, but for one reason or another, he sleeps in or something comes about where he's unable to recite Salat al-Layl. As long as that intention was there within his heart, and even though the action itself does not materialize, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will still give him the reward for it. Why? Because al-a'malu bin-niyyah. Because this person created the intention, but for one reason or another was not able to materialize his intentions into actions. In fact, the core difference, the standard which distinguishes a munafiq from a Muslim is the intention that sits in the heart, is the niyyah, is the intention behind that particular action. They say a man once came towards the Holy Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and he said, would I receive reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if I gave my wealth in return for fame? The Holy Prophet said no. He said, what if I was to get reward? Would I get reward if I gave wealth to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to earn fame? Prophet said no. Allah only accepts that which is sincerely done for Him. Something that is good is performed with the intention of seeking proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a beautiful hadith of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. When speaking about this particular verse in the Holy Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, that the purpose of our creation, that the purpose of our life is to see how or who from amongst us can enhance in our good deeds. The Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says with regards to the tafsir of this verse, لَيْسَ يَعَنِ أَكْثَرُ عَمَلًا وَلَكِنْ أَسْوَبَكُمْ عَمَلًا. It's not to say how many of you can capitalize in terms of good deeds through quantity, but rather it is through quality. وَالْإِبْقَاء عَلَى الْأَمَلِ حَتَّى يَخْلُصَ أَشَدَّ مِنَ الْأَمَلِ. This is a beautiful saying towards the end of the hadith. He says, and to remain in the state of good intentions throughout the act until the person has finished that particular act is far greater than performing the action itself. Now imagine, for example, a famous example that the scholars give is, imagine a person who enters his salah. He enters his salah with the purest of intentions, and he prays, but then his intentions fluctuate throughout his salah until the moment he leaves his salah, he may leave his salah with different intentions altogether. Imagine a person who starts his prayers, but then one of his friends walks into the masjid, or one of his employers walks into the masjid, or whatever these examples are. The intention of the human being, whilst performing the action, has the ability to fluctuate from one state to another. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says that the human being who keeps the purest of intentions throughout the act itself is harder than to perform the act. To keep sincerest of intentions whilst I'm praying is harder than the act of prayers in itself. And of course, there's a famous question that is often asked, when I am engaging in amalun salih, when I am engaging in good and righteous deeds, how do I know that I have the sincerest of intentions? One of the standards or the questions that is often asked, that a person should ask himself whilst performing the action, is this act that I am performing, what am I seeking from it? Is it the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it the pleasure from the people? Is it the praise from Allah, divine praise from Allah, or am I seeking praise from the people? This question is a profound question that acts as a standard for you and I to discern whether our actions is with the sincerest of intentions or not. Therefore, in conclusion, when you find that there is a person who combines both Iman and Amalun Saleh with the sincerest of intentions, it brings about hidayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fruition of this is that Allah guides this person. And when Allah guides this person, there is no misguidance for him whatsoever. وَمَن يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ فَلَا مُضِلَّ لَهُ. And whoever Allah guides, there is no deviances for this person. This person may not sway into the wrong path. This person will remain steadfast. He will protect himself from any deviances and misguidance. Number two, he will submit himself to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a very absolute manner, even if it means giving his own life away from him, meaning giving his own life away for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or giving something which is absolutely precious to that person, whether it be wealth, whether it be health, or even our lives at time. When a person, for example, submits to the laws of Allah, submits to His wisdom, submits to His the choices that He makes for us in our lives, when this person behaves in such a way, Allah guides him such that the only thing he can see is the horizons of the hereafter. He is no longer bothered with dunya and the affairs of dunya. Number two, he is willing to give up what is most precious to him for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why in the ziyarah of the Holy Lady Hazrat Ma'suma salamullahi alayha, we say, Allahumma inni as'aluka an takhtima li bis sa'ada fala taslub minni ma ana fi wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. Ya Allah, when I move towards you, I see absolute happiness. I see the true manifestations of happiness in my life. It says, Ya Allah, make my end an end of happiness, of sa'ada, and do not take away from me what you have given me. The greatest blessings that Allah has given us is the blessings of Iman, the effects of which we see in this world as well as in the hereafter. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ. And there is neither might nor power except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most great and the most exalted. وآخر الدعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. If I can request a Surah Al-Fatiha for all our marhumin, inshallah. Surah Al-Mubarakah Al-Fatiha.